Welcome to Ridgepoint. We're so glad you're here. If you're new to our church, take a minute and connect with us on our website, wenatcheechurch.com. We'd love to hear from you. And if you're from the Wenatchee area, stop by and join us in person sometime. We want to help you grow and connect. Thanks again for listening. Our prayer is that what you hear today helps you take the next step in your journey of faith.
Most people are perfectly fine with the idea of being different, especially in America. We kind of revel in our individuality, don't we? A lot of times, though, we will do so as long as that difference stays harmless. Like once it starts to step on our toes, we don't like different. We're okay with, different coffee preferences or different personality types or different hobbies or interests and things like that. But the kind of different that we usually celebrate is safe. Most of the ways that we enjoy being different are just surface level. They're about style or taste or personality. They don't challenge the deeper values of the world around us. But there's another kind of different. One that doesn't just stand out, but it stands against the current. A kind of difference that isn't chosen because it feels good, but because it's true. A kind of different that quietly exposes what a culture loves and trusts and worships. And that kind of different has always made people uncomfortable because it refuses to bow to the same values or chase the same rewards or measure life the same way. And that kind of different is actually what has marked the people of God all throughout history. Despite the culture, despite the values of everyone around them, what is true has been what the people of God have held to move forward. In every generation, God has had a people who simply did not fit, not because they were trying to be weird, but because they were shaped by something deeper than the world around them. And that's the kind of different that Jesus is forming for us in his sermon here in Luke chapter number 6. This sermon is not about how to get better results out of life. It's not about strategic strategies for success or for happiness or personal fulfillment. It's actually about who you are and who you are becoming. Luke is very intentional with how he sets this scene. Jesus spends the night in prayer. Not just as an example of discipline for us, but because something foundational is about to happen. From that prayer, he then chooses the 12. These men then become the foundation of a new people of God, not defined by ethnicity or land or temple, but defined by their allegiance to Jesus Christ. And then Jesus comes down to this level place and crowds begin to gather from Judea and Jerusalem and even Gentile regions, it tells us, like Tyre and Sidon. And sick bodies are healed. Unclean spirits are cast out. Luke tells us power went out from him and healed them all. And then after all of this, Jesus speaks. And what follows in his words are not accidental. It's not just some inspirational reflection for us. This speech that he gives, this sermon that he gives, is formational. Jesus is reshaping how his disciples understand blessing, how they understand love and righteousness and judgment and obedience, and ultimately what it means to belong to God. This sermon answers really one central question. What does life look like when God's kingdom truly takes root in a person? What does it look like when God's kingdom takes root in a person? And the answer is pretty simple. It looks different, different from the world around them. Jesus outlines here a few different ways to live. And if we're going to follow the Savior, if we're going to follow Jesus, then that means not only following his call and example as we've already been challenged with so far in this series, but that means following his way. His way of living is different. It's less about rules and regulations and a long list of things you need to do like the Pharisees were promoting. It's about who you are and who you're becoming. So this morning, let's just take a moment and apprentice under Jesus and learn his way. What we learn first about the kingdom way, when we look at how he defines this, is that those who are living in his kingdom way define a life of blessing differently. They define a life of blessing differently. We learn that we need to measure blessings the way that Jesus does. We learn to measure blessing the way that Jesus defines it. Let's read those verses and see what we mean by that. It says, "Then he lifted up his eyes toward his disciples and said, 'Blessed are you poor, for yours is the kingdom of God. Blessed are you who hunger now, for you shall be filled. Blessed are you who weep now, for you shall laugh. Blessed are you when men hate you and when they exclude you and revile you and cast out your name as evil for the Son of Man's sake. Rejoice in that day and leap for joy, for indeed your reward is great in heaven. For in like manner their fathers did to the prophets. But woe to you who are rich, for you've received your consolation. Woe to you who are full, for you shall hunger. Woe to you who laugh now, for you shall mourn and weep. Woe to you when all men speak well of you, for so did their fathers to the false prophets.'" Already he's twisting some things that they would have thought. He starts there. First, it tells us that he lifted up his eyes toward his disciples, those 12. That tells us that these words are not first directed at the curious crowd, but at those who have already committed to follow him. These are men and women who have left stability behind. And Jesus begins speaking to them with blessing. "Blessed are you who are poor, for yours is the kingdom of God." In the first century Jewish world, poverty was not neutral. It was often assumed to be the result of sin or failure or of God's disfavor. Wealth, on the other hand, was commonly interpreted as evidence of blessing. Oh, they're wealthy? God is blessing them. And Jesus is saying that's not always the case. Jesus dismantles that framework. The poor, the dependent, the ones with no illusion of self-sufficiency, the kingdom belongs to them. He says, "Blessed are you who hunger now, for you shall be filled." Now, hunger here is not merely metaphorical. Many in Jesus' audience experienced real and daily hunger, but Jesus is also speaking to a deeper ache, a longing for God to make things right. In his Sermon on the Mount, the sermon that is coupled with this, he says, those who hunger and thirst after righteousness. They're hungering for justice and righteousness to come to fruition. And Jesus says, "Blessed are you who are in that hungry state, for you will be filled. Blessed are you who weep now, for you shall laugh." Weeping is the honest response to a broken world. And Jesus doesn't rebuke it, he dignifies it and promises that sorrow will not have the final word. Then Jesus takes this even further. "Blessed are you when men hate you for the Son of Man's sake." He's saying faithfulness to Jesus will often bring rejection. That rejection does not negate your blessing. If you're rejected, it might actually confirm your allegiance to Jesus Christ. Because later in the New Testament, it says this, "Know this, that if they reject me, they will reject you. If they hate me, they will hate you." Then comes the woes. "Woe to you who are rich, for you have received your consolation." Notice he doesn't say you will receive your consolation. He says you've already received it if you're rich. Jesus, he's warning against settling for temporary comfort at the expense of eternal joy. "Woe to you who are full now, who laugh now, who all men speak well of you." Now, Jesus in this moment is not condemning enjoyment. He's not condemning wealth and resources. He's not condemning those things. He's exposing to them that their idea of what is blessing is actually false security. When comfort becomes the definition of our blessing, our hunger for God quietly begins to disappear. What Jesus is doing here is not being cruel to them and trying to twist things. He's giving them hope. This is profoundly hopeful. When he says the poor are blessed, the hungry are blessed, the weeping are blessed, he's not pretending those conditions are good. He's declaring those who belong to him are secure even when their present circumstances are unstable because their future is certain. The blessing is not postponed until later. It begins now because the future kingdom has already broken into the present. The poor are blessed now because the kingdom already belongs to them. The hungry are blessed now because they are guaranteed filling. The weeping are blessed now because joy is not a question of if, but when. That future hope reaches back into our present reality, and it gives us stability. It gives us meaning and endurance in the middle of hardship. But the woes that Jesus gives here reveal the other side of the equation. Those who feel secure now, full, laughing, applauded, are actually in danger of anchoring their hearts to things that cannot last. Their comfort feels like stability, but it's actually temporary and fragile. And when present comfort becomes the place where hope rests, there is no future to lean into, only loss when those comforts fade. Think about it. If all your comfort comes from financial stability, then you're just setting yourself up for when that stability isn't there financially to not have comfort. But when your comfort is in the fact that you are in Jesus Christ and you have a future hope in heaven and he will bring you to fruition the kingdom, he says, don't worry about the poor, the poverty now when you have the kingdom one day. When you anchor yourself in that hope, that means when the financial instability does come, I still have comfort. Why? Because my comfort wasn't in the finances to begin with. My comfort wasn't in the circumstances around me to begin with. That's what he's trying to get at here. We find that comfort and present stability now because of our eternal hope. But when comfort becomes our anchor, it cannot hold us when loss comes. Jesus calls us to build our confidence not on what feels secure today, but on what will stand forever. So we learn to measure blessing the way Jesus does, by what we have promised in him. But notice, secondly, as followers of Jesus, we also choose to love when it costs us. We choose to love even when it costs. Look at verses 27 through 36. But I say to you who hear, love your enemies. Now I'll just say for a brief, quick minute, every single part of this sermon of Jesus is convicting. Okay? So as we're going through, don't be like, oh man, Pastor Micah is getting to me today. No. I've already been worked on plenty this week studying for this message, all right? God has gotten a hold of my heart several ways this week as I've been studying. So this sermon, it's about to get real, okay? Listen to some of these things. Love your enemies. Do good to those who hate you. Bless those who curse you. And pray for those who spitefully use you. To him who strikes you on the one cheek, offer the other also. And from him who takes away your cloak, do not withhold your tunic either. Give to everyone who asks of you, and from him who takes away your goods, do not ask them back. And just as you want men to do to you, you also do to them likewise. But if you love those who love you, what credit is that to you? For even sinners love those who love them. And if you do good to those who do good to you, what credit is that to you? For even sinners do the same. And if you lend those to those from whom you hope to receive back, what credit is that to you? For even sinners lend to sinners to receive as much back. But love your enemies. Do good and lend, hoping for nothing in return. And your reward will be great. And you will be the sons of the Most High, for he is kind to the unthankful and evil. Therefore, be merciful, just as your Father also is merciful. Who's ready to have the invitation? Yeah, this is convicting. Jesus begins this section with a phrase that should make us lean in. But I say to you who hear. In other words, what he's saying is this: not everyone will receive this. Not everyone will accept this. But if you're truly listening, if you're really my disciple, this is what I'm calling you to. And then Jesus says something that has no parallel in the ordinary moral thinking of the ancient world. Love your enemies. In the Roman world, strength meant crushing your enemies. In the honor-shame world of the first century, dignity meant defending your reputation and repaying insult. In the religious world of the Pharisees, righteousness often meant separating from the wrong people and protecting yourself from contamination. And Jesus comes into that world and says this: no, my people live differently. Then he pushes it further. Do good to those who hate you. Bless those who curse you. Pray for those who spitefully use you. Notice the progression. Love your enemies could still be interpreted as a private feeling. But Jesus won't let it remain vague. Love your enemies. Say that you have some kind of loving feeling toward them. He turns it into costly obedience that confronts our instinct to retaliate. He says, do good. That's love that takes action. Bless. That's love that uses words for the good of even those who curse us. Pray. That's love that brings them before God when we think they don't deserve it. Wow, that kind of love. And then Jesus gives the kind of examples that make everyone feel uncomfortable because they're so specific. To him who strikes you on the one cheek, offer the other also. In that culture, a slap on the cheek is not simply physical, it's social humiliation. It's an insult. It's degradation. Jesus is saying, when someone dishonors you, when someone tries to bait you into a war of retaliation, you don't have to play that game. You don't have to be ruled by the demand to protect yourself at all costs. He continues, and from him who takes away your cloak, do not withhold your tunic either. If the cloak is your outer garment, it's also your protection at night. In fact, in the Old Testament law, a cloak could even be protected because it was so basic to survival in the cold. And Jesus is here not saying that we have to enable criminals. That's not what he's saying. If someone steals from you, enable them. That's not what he's saying. What he's saying is this. He's saying you need to have a posture. Kingdom people have a posture of open-handedness, not clenched-fistedness. This is mine. If people take things from me, it's like God gives and God takes away. I have open hands and not clenched fists when it comes to my things. And then he says, give to everyone who asks of you. And from him who takes away your goods, do not ask them back. It doesn't mean there's never a place for justice or wisdom in what we give to people, but it does mean that disciples must stop treating generosity like a loophole-filled contract. Well, maybe I'll be generous as long as they're not going to use it on. And if they're not, and we have all these loopholes of, well, I can be generous and I will be generous, but there's a lot of stipulations to this. Jesus says your heart should have a default posture, not of what can I keep? How can I love other people? That should be our heart posture when it comes to generosity. Not what can I keep, but how can I love people? And then he gives the summary statement there. And just as you want men to do to you, you also do to them likewise. This isn't treat people the way they treat you. This is treat people the way you'd want to be treated if you were the one in the wrong, if you were the one desperate, if you were the one in need. Treat those people as if you were in their position, how you would want to be treated. And then Jesus exposes how small our natural love really is. If you love those who love you, what credit is that to you? For even sinners love those who love them. In other words, if your love is only responsive, only reciprocal, only for people who deserve it, then you're not doing anything supernatural. The world already does that. The world already loves people that love them. They already do good things for people who will do good for them. Jesus is saying there's nothing supernatural in that. Those who are part of my kingdom, there's a supernatural element to this. They go beyond that. They love people who hate them. They bless people who curse them. They give to people who and pray for people who will use them. If you do good things to those who do good to you, what credit is it to you? For even sinners do the same. And if you lend to those from who you hope to receive back, what credit is it to you? For even sinners lend to sinners to receive as much back. Jesus isn't describing exceptional evil when he says the word sinners. He's just describing ordinary life without God. Human relationships built on repayment, leverage, and return. That's normal world relationships. But kingdom love is different. He says, love your enemies, do good, and lend, hoping for nothing in return. That line is clarifying, not hoping as in I wish they would repay, but expecting nothing, not living on the hook of return. And then Jesus gives the promise. He says, and you do this, and your reward will be great. And you will be sons of the Most High. Not you will become sons, as if we earn our adoption, but you will show yourselves to be sons of the Most High. You will display your family resemblance, because that's how the family of God operates. And here's the foundation of it all. For he is kind, God is, to the unthankful and the evil. God is kind to people who do not say thank you. God is kind to people who do not deserve it. God sends rain and sun, breath and food, life and patience, even to those who ignore him. And then Jesus lands it all. So be merciful, just as your Father also is merciful. Jesus doesn't just tell us to love, he tells us why, because that's what our Father is like. The illustration is God himself. Jesus, in good preacher fashion, has an illustration, and the illustration he uses is the Father himself. You know the way he loves you? That's the way we ought to love other people. That's why. Is because he's already loved you. As long as we love people where it's easy people, like as long as we only love people that will be appreciative, or as long as we only love people that can stay predictable on what they give us back, we're living as the same way that the world does. But Jesus is not forming a people who love when it's convenient. He's forming a people who love when it costs them. That means when someone talks about you and you find out, the first impulse is to defend yourself and to make sure the record is set straight. But Jesus says, bless those who curse you. So instead of returning fire, you return prayer. You ask God to work in them. You ask God to keep you from bitterness. You ask God to give you clean hands and a soft heart. It means when someone is difficult and you'd rather avoid them, Jesus doesn't give you the option to shrink your love down to the size of your comfort. He says, do good to those who hate you. Love isn't just what you feel, it's what you choose. And it means generosity that doesn't run on a contract. Some of us give and then think quietly, then we keep quiet mental receipts. Like, I did this, so they owe me that. But Jesus says, lend, expecting nothing in return. That means we throw entitlement out the window. It doesn't mean we throw wisdom out the window, like, oh, I need to be wise with where I'm generous. It means we throw entitlement out the window. We don't go, it's mine and I can't give it. And then here's the deepest application. The only way this becomes possible is if you realize this is how God treated you. If the gospel is real, if God has been merciful to you, then the heart begins to loosen. You stop needing repayment because you already have reward. You stop needing vengeance because you trust the judge. You stop needing to guard every inch of your dignity because you belong to the Most High God. Now, if we're honest, loving that way is hard. And part of what makes it so hard is that we tend to see other people's failures far more clearly than our own. When love is costly, our instinct is often to justify ourselves and critique others. And so Jesus, after he speaks about loving your enemies, he immediately turns the lens inward. Because before we start correcting the world around us, Jesus wants to deal with what's going on inside of us. That's why he now teaches us that we must examine ourselves before we evaluate others. We must examine ourselves before we evaluate others. Look at verse 37 through 42. Judge not, and you shall not be judged. Condemn not, and you shall not be condemned. Forgive, and you will be forgiven. Give, and it will be given to you. Good measure, pressed down, shaken together, and running over will it be put into your bosom. For with the same measure that you use it, it will be measured back to you. And he spoke a parable to them. Can the blind lead the blind? Will they not both fall into the ditch? A disciple is not above his teacher, but everyone who is perfectly trained will be like his teacher. And why do you look at the speck in your brother's eye, but do not perceive the plank in your own eye? Or how can you say to your brother, brother, let me remove the speck that is in your eye, when you yourself do not see the plank that is in your own eye? Hypocrite, first remove the plank from your own eye, and then you will see clearly to remove the speck that is in your brother's eye. So after Jesus speaks about love, he moves directly into our posture toward other people's sin and failure and weaknesses. Judge not, and you shall not be judged. Condemn not, and you shall not be condemned. This is one of the most quoted lines, I think, in our culture, and it's almost always quoted in a way Jesus did not mean it. Jesus is not teaching moral indifference. He's teaching humility. Because the moment you keep reading, he says, forgive, and you'll be forgiven. Give, and it will be given to you. So Jesus isn't saying, when he says judge not and condemn not, he's not saying nothing is ever wrong. That's not what he's saying when he says these words. He's saying this, be careful that your posture toward others is not condemnation. Be careful your posture toward others is not condemnation. Then he adds a principle. For with the same measure you use, it will be measured back to you. In other words, the standard you wield becomes the standard you face. The way you size people up will be the way you are sized up. And the truth is, the measure that you use reveals what you believe about God's mercy. Then Jesus asked, why do you look at the speck in your brother's eye, but do not perceive the plank in your own eye? Now, don't rush past how sharp that is. Jesus assumes something about us. We are naturally observant about other people's flaws, aren't we? We're experts in the weaknesses of others. We can write essays on the speck in someone else's eye. It's all over social media. Essays and articles on other people's specks in their eye. But Jesus says, you do not perceive the plank in your own eye. He doesn't say you don't have one. He says, you don't even notice it. He's like, you have one for sure. You don't even notice it in your eye, though. You just don't see it. That's spiritual blindness. Jesus even says, can the blind lead the blind? I love that. That's a funny picture when I think about it. They both end up in the ditch, he says. Like the one guy says, I can't see any better than you can, but I'll get you there. Like, it makes no sense. That's what Jesus is saying, right? That the blind leading the blind when we have things all in our eyes, trying to help other people with the things that are in their eyes. And then Jesus it says, how can you say to your brother, let me remove the speck that is in your eye when you yourself do not see the plank in your own eye? Then Jesus says the word nobody wants to hear, hypocrite. Hypocrite. He gives us the order then in which this should take place. He says, first remove the plank from your own eye, then you will see clearly to remove the speck in your brother's eye. Jesus doesn't end with leave the speck in their eye. That's what a lot of people say, judge not, condemn not. And what they're saying is, leave the speck in my eye. That's not how Jesus ends this teaching. He says this, pause for a moment, take care of the huge 2x4 sticking out of your eye before you come in, then you need to get to the speck, but you need to evaluate yourself first. Examine yourself. He says, you help yourself first, examine yourself, then you can help. The goal isn't silence, the goal is clarity. The kind of clarity that comes from repentance. This is Jesus as a master teacher here. The exaggeration makes the point unforgettable. A plank in your own eye, trying to perform eye surgery on someone else who is just absurd. And that's what he's saying. Unrepentant judgment is exactly that, absurd. When we're unrepentant about our own things, but we're trying to judge other people about their things. And here's what this means in real church life. It means we can easily become the kind of people who are always scanning the room for problems, always diagnosing others, always noticing what everyone else needs to fix. And we can convince ourselves that it's because we have discernment. But Jesus says, no, sometimes that's just hypocrisy wearing religious clothes. We need to make sure that before we have the hard conversation with someone, we go before the Lord and say, God, search me. Not just as a formality, God, I'm coming to you because I really want to get to them. Like not just as a formality, but as a necessity. God, I need you to work on me first so that I can help my brother, help my sister in Christ. So that means we go and we ask, God, am I angry because I love them or because they offended me? Am I correcting them to restore them or to prove myself right? It means when someone sins, you don't start with condemnation. You start with grief. You start with prayer. You start with the recognition, apart from grace, that could be me. And it means the church becomes a place where truth and mercy meet. We don't ignore specks. That's truth. Truth and mercy meet here. We don't ignore the specks in each other's eyes, but we also don't throw stones. We don't excuse sin, but we also don't devour one another. Jesus is forming a people who can actually help each other because they see clearly. And if we're going to examine ourselves honestly, Jesus knows we need more than vague introspection. We need something concrete to look at. And so he moves from how we see to what we produce, from vision to fruit, because the clearest evidence of what's going on inside a person is not what they claim, but what consistently comes out of their life. That's why Jesus now teaches us to pay attention to what our life is producing. Pay attention to what your life is producing. Look at verses 43 through 45 with me. For a good tree does not bear bad fruit, nor does a bad tree bear good fruit. For every tree is known by its own fruit. For men do not gather figs from thorns, nor do they gather grapes from a bramble bush. A good man out of the good treasure of his heart brings forth good, and an evil man out of the evil treasure of his heart brings forth evil. For out of the abundance of the heart his mouth speaks. Jesus now moves from the external to the internal because he knows what we tend to do with sermons like this. We try to perform them. We hear things like, love your enemies, do these, and we are like, okay, I got a bunch of things I can do outwardly. And it seems to do that, but he starts to move it inwardly to our heart because we try to perform sermons like this. We try to sound merciful and act loving and appear humble while the heart stays untouched. And so Jesus says this, for a good tree does not bear bad fruit, nor a bad tree bear good fruit. To us, that sounds just like a proverb. But to them, it was an obvious reality. Trees reveal what they are by the fruit that they produce. You don't have to label the tree. You don't have to interview the tree. You don't have to ask the tree what it intends to be or what it wants to be. You look at the fruit. Every tree is known by its own fruit. And then Jesus makes it concrete. For men do not gather figs from thorns, nor do they gather grapes from a bramble bush. Nobody walks up to a thorn bush hoping for figs. Nobody goes to a bramble bush expecting grapes. The nature of the plant produces a product. And Jesus draws the heart connection for us. He says, a good man out of the good treasure of his heart brings forth good. An evil man out of the evil treasure of his heart brings forth evil. Here Jesus uses the language of treasure. Your heart is a storehouse. It holds what you value most. And what is stored up in your heart eventually comes out. And then the line that cuts through every mask, he says, for out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. Not out of the abundance of your circumstances, not out of the abundance of your stress, not out of the abundance of your tired week, out of the abundance of your heart. Jesus is saying your mouth is a messenger, and your words reveal your inner world. You know, when we think of this, you can take an apple tree and you can nail oranges to its branches. That doesn't make it an orange tree. You might fool someone at a distance, but for just a moment, but eventually the truth shows itself. Because fruit doesn't determine the root. The root determines the fruit. Apples will keep growing because that's what the tree actually is. And that's exactly Jesus' point here. When he tells us to pay attention to the fruit of our lives, he's not calling us to police external behavior or manage appearances. He's teaching us how to diagnose what's actually going on the inside. Our words, our reactions, our patterns, and our responses, they're not random, they're revealing. They show what we're drawing life from. So the solution isn't to staple better behavior onto a sick tree. It's to bring the heart to Jesus and let him change what's at the root. And when we honestly pay attention to what our life is producing, this is where discipleship starts to get honest, because the truth is we're good at blaming fruit on weather. We're good at saying, I only snapped because I'm stressed. I only said that because I'm tired. I only reacted that way because they pushed my buttons. And listen, stress is real, tiredness is real, pressure is real, but Jesus says that pressure doesn't create what's already or what's not already in there. Pressure actually just reveals what's already in there. The fruit shows the root. So this invites us to a different kind of self-examination. Not just, did I mess up, but what is being stored up in me that just came out? When your mouth runs to criticism, what treasure is that revealing in your heart? When your reactions are harsh, what treasure is that revealing in your heart? When you can't stop worrying, what treasure is that revealing? When you're easily offended, what treasure is that revealing? Jesus isn't calling us to cosmetic changes. He's calling us to heart transformation, which means the goal is not merely to control our words. The goal is to fill the heart with better treasure. Because when the treasure changes, the fruit changes. So how do you do that? You come to Christ again and again and again. Through his word, through prayer, through repentance, through worship, through fellowship, you keep bringing the heart under his care. And as the root transforms into something good, good fruit will be the result. And this is then where Jesus refuses to let us stop at just the diagnosis. If fruit reveals the root, then obedience is not about stapling behavior onto a dead heart. It's about giving a living heart somewhere solid to grow. When God changes us on the inside, that change doesn't remain invisible. It takes shape. It moves outward. Obedience is not how we make ourselves right with God, but it's how a transformed heart actually lives. Transformed heart begins to obey. So when Jesus now turns and speaks about doing his words, he's not contradicting everything he just said. He's completing the thought. Because a heart made new will not only hear him, it will trust him enough to follow him. So Jesus ends the sermon by teaching us that we build our life on obedience, not just on intention. Look at verses 46 to the end of the chapter. But why do you call me Lord, Lord, and not do the things which I say? Whoever comes to me and hears my sayings and does them, I will show you whom he is like. He's like a man building a house who dug deep and laid the foundation on the rock. And when the flood arose, the stream beat vehemently against that house and could not shake it, for it was founded on the rock. But he who heard and did nothing is like a man who built a house on the earth without a foundation, against which the stream beat vehemently, and immediately it fell, and the ruin of that house was great." So Jesus ends this sermon with a question that confronts really the most dangerous form of religion. Why do you call me Lord and not do the things that I say? Notice this isn't atheism, this isn't open rebellion. He's saying this, you have religious language, but you don't have a surrendered life. Lord, Lord, you're using the right title, they're using the right words, they may even feel sincere, but Jesus asks, why do you say it and not do it? Then he gives the final picture, "Whoever comes to me and hears my sayings and does them, I'll show you whom he is like." Notice just quickly the threefold description of a true disciple he gives there. He comes to him, he hears him, and then he does them. Did you catch that? A true disciple, that's the threefold description of a disciple. They come to Jesus, they hear what Jesus has to say, and they do what they heard Jesus say. That's a disciple, a follower of Jesus. Not just hearing sermons, coming to Jesus. Not just admiring truth, obeying truth. Then the illustration, he's like a man building a house who dug deep and laid the foundation on the rock. That phrase, dug deep, tells us something. Foundations, they're not glamorous. Nobody compliments foundations. Nobody drives by a house and says, "Whoa, what a beautiful foundation." But foundations decide everything. Jesus continues, "And when the flood arose, the stream beat vehemently against that house and could not shake it because it was founded on the rock." Notice something, obedience does not remove storms. Storms still come for those who follow God's way. Floods still rise. Streams still beat vehemently. The difference is not storm-free living. The difference is stability in the midst of the storm. Because Jesus gives the contrast. He who heard and did nothing is like a man who built a house on the earth without a foundation. The same hearing, but a different response. And when the stream comes and beats vehemently against that house and the storm comes, that house immediately falls and the ruin of the house is great. Jesus is giving a warning here because he loves his followers. He's saying great ruin is avoidable, but only if you take what I'm saying seriously. This is where we have to slow down and let Jesus look us in the eye for a moment and evaluate us. Because it's possible to sit under Jesus' teaching, nod along, agree, even be moved, and still build on sand. It's possible to love sermons, love truth, love doctrine, love worship, and still refuse obedience in the specific places that Jesus is calling. This is why Jesus asks, "Why do you call me Lord and not do what I say?" Because Lord isn't a vibe. Lord is not just some label. Lord is a reality of who he is. And if that is who he is, it's a reality that demands surrender from us. So here's what this looks like. When Jesus says forgive and you hold on to bitterness, you're building without a foundation. When Jesus says love your enemies and you keep rehearsing revenge in your mind, you're building without a foundation. When Jesus says remove the plank and you remain defensive and unrepentant, you're building without a foundation. And it may look fine for a while, but a house without a foundation can only look strong in good weather. You can decorate it, you can invite people over, you can enjoy it, but storms don't ask permission. When those floods rise, when the streams beat, and Jesus says the real test is not how spiritual you looked in the calm seasons, it's actually what's going to remain when the pressure hits. So the call of the sermon from Jesus is not some vague inspiration, it's specific obedience, not perfection, but real surrender. Not just intention, but practicing his way. Because stability is not built in a moment. It's built in 1,000 acts of obedience that nobody ever applauds. Digging deep, laying foundation, day after day after day. And here's the beauty of it all. Jesus does not preach this sermon to crush us. He preaches it to invite us. The poor, the hungry, the weeping, the rejected, he says, blessed. Because the kingdom is for people who know they need him. This isn't try harder Christianity. This is come to me discipleship. Come to him, hear his words, do them. And as you do, you become the kind of person who lives a different way because you belong to a different kingdom. Now, what Jesus has given us in this sermon is not some kind of checklist. It truly is an invitation. He's shown us a different way to live because he's forming a different kind of people. People who measure blessing by eternity, not by comfort in the moment. People who love when it costs. People who examine themselves before condemning or evaluating others. People who care about what is happening in the heart, not just what appears on the surface. And people who build their lives not on good intentions, but on obedience that flows from trust. But here's even better news. I said that was good news. Even better news. This sermon is not something Jesus gives us and then stands in back and goes, good luck. He knows we cannot live this way on our own. He knows our love falls short. He knows our hearts are divided. He knows our foundations are often shaky. So instead of demanding this life from a distance, Jesus stepped into our place to make it possible. He entered our broken world. He experienced poverty and hunger and grief and rejection and suffering. Not because he deserved it, but because we do. And he did it in our place. He lived the life that we were created to live, but that we failed to live. And then he went to the cross to take on the weight of our sin and our rebellion and our failure upon himself. And when he rose from the grave, he opened the door for forgiveness and new life and real transformation. That means Christianity is not about cleaning ourselves up to prove ourselves worthy by doing these things. It's about trusting Jesus to do for us what we could never have done for ourselves. That means this message is not a call to just try harder. It's a call to come to him, truly. To bring our hunger and our brokenness and our sin and our divided hearts and our unstable foundations to Jesus and let him make us new from the inside out. And as he does, our lives begin to look different because we belong to a different kingdom. Because the truth is this, a life that is built on Jesus looks different than the world around them. And on top of that, when everything else is going crazy around them, a life built on Jesus doesn't just look different, it stands when everything else falls.
Thanks for tuning in. If you haven't already, make sure to like and subscribe so you never miss a message. And maybe share this with a friend who you think it might be an encouragement to. If you want to support what God is doing here at Bridgepoint, visit WenatcheeChurch.com. May God strengthen you as you follow him. We'll see you next time.